Government Chief Whip with the Sisters of Charity having eventual, or any entity having eventual ownership of the hospital?
Absolutely not, and I'm quite upset at Mattie's attitude. Not because he's Mattie, but because he is a political representative. And if I hear any more TDs saying that this is flippant, pedantic, about the nuns, I really will get quite angry with this country, because what Mattie is saying, and remember Mattie is a man, is that women in this country in particular shouldn't have any concerns about nuns controlling their reproductive rights. And those reproductive rights range from everything from termination to IV treatment to sex reassignment, and they're being told that you should trust the nuns. This is just... and really what Mattie is saying is that 100,000 people who signed the petition within a few days are being silly and pedantic and are creating a storm in the teacup. Yeah, I'm afraid it's not. Ireland has moved on. Ireland has moved on quite radically and quite differently to what it was. And I think the convergence of the Citizens' Assembly with the issue of the hospital shows that there is a majority and a sentiment in this country that is quite different to what it was in the day gone by when the Catholic Church had us all living in fear. People want control of their own lives, and they want to see women treated equally. And the hospital issue is an example of that.
Is there no governance arrangement, no promise that you've heard in the last 2 weeks that would allay that fear if you genuinely hold it? That it's not going to be nuns at the door or nuns on the board or anything like that?
No, I haven't heard anything about no nuns on the board. The nuns, the Sisters of Charity, still play a major role in St Vincent's Hospital, and St Vincent's Hospital own the land that technically they own the land, but as one historian, Dermot Ferreter, argued in the newspapers over the weekend, in reality it probably does belong to the Irish people, because they were funded by the sweepstakes for years in order to build that hospital and to buy the land on which it is built. So in reality it could be a state-owned hospital, and I don't think it's not about Brid Smith and her fears and her desires being assuaged. It's the population that you want to convince, and they don't want the nuns to have any hand at apart. It should be CPO'd, and the state should own it.
What about Dr. Rona Mahoney, who delivers babies every day, saves women's lives and babies' lives every month? What about the fact that she is at peace with what's going to happen?
Well, I've every sympathy with Dr. Rona Mahoney's position, because she has to manage and look after the whole delivery of the maternity services in the biggest hospital, I believe one of the biggest hospitals, maternity hospitals in Europe. And she's very frustrated with the sort of building and facilities and lack of proper access to decent consultants, etc., that women need when they're in a crisis. So I've every sympathy with her saying, let's get on with it. But I have no doubt if Dr. Ronan O'Mahony was given a choice between A or B, a hospital that's fully owned by the state or a hospital that's owned by a religious order who have a completely discredited history, I know what she would choose, the same as all of us want to see.
Colm Brophy, your party colleague Regina Doherty, I'll ask you the same question I asked her. Are you at peace with an eventual deal that gives...
This is to do with women's reproductive rights, and women have had enough of the church controlling their health.
And see, this is where Brid comes from her ideology point.
Of course I have an ideology point.
You have legally binding contracts which absolutely safeguard those rights, which you just don't want to accept.
Let me ask one question then.
Because the ownership
you're not the nuns, and I can't really get an answer to this.
The ownership is not...
A very interesting question is, why do they want to own it?
The ownership...
Why do they want to own it?
The ownership, one way or the other, doesn't actually safeguard those rights. What safeguards those rights is the clear legal agreement which has been entered into to preserve the ethos and operation practice.
You said to Brid about her ethos. Her ethos has Oireachtas reports behind it. Go back to 1996 and read the Madonna House report about 15 children that were raped under the Sisters of Charity's care. Go back and read the Ryan report from 2009 and read about St Joseph's Kilkenny and read about St Patrick's Kilkenny, where children were raped under the Sisters' care, and the Sisters didn't report it, and those men who raped those children went on to adopt and foster children and then raped those children as well.
I'm sure
go back and read those reports and then say that Brid's ethos isn't based on anything, and that the passion of the last 2 weeks around the country isn't based on anything.
But the point I'm making to you is, if I thought there was a situation in which the ethos of the Sisters of Charity was going to be running Holles Street Hospital in the future, I would not support it.
That's only one part of this.
The state are forking out the 300 million and is going to guarantee the ethos. Why is it not owned?
Because the state asked for it from the government, not the other way around.
Well, actually, to be clear about this, the state didn't ask for it. The Holles Street went and wanted to come up with a situation where they could have a co-location.
Okay,
it was Holles Street that drove it initially.
In case you've just joined us, you're listening to Mattie McGrath, independent TD in the Tipperary constituency, Brid Smith, People Before Profit TD for Dublin South Central, and also Colm Brophy speaking there, Fine Gael TD for Dublin South West. And we're going to talk about the issue of the Citizens' Assembly, because there was a march today. Time for action, no more delays, implement the findings of the Citizens' Assembly immediately. This is a call to have a referendum to repeal the 8th Amendment. Brid, you were involved in a press conference about this today. You want this to be put to referendum immediately. Are you confident you'd win?
I think there would be a majority in this country to have the 8th Amendment removed from the Constitution. Women's reproductive health has no place in the Constitution. You don't see men's reproductive health in there. And I think there would be a majority in favour of it. And I think the Citizens' Assembly, albeit something that we opposed and saw it as a delaying tactic, has clearly proven to the government parties and to Fianna Fáil and many of the independents, even though they may not like the results, but it has shown that there's no longer this middle Ireland that somehow lives in a kind of a halfway house, but there's a very definite change in the culture and the support in this country for women's rights and for women's autonomy.
So do you really believe that the majority of people in this country would be in favour of abortion on demand or abortion without restriction?
That's not what I said. I think the majority of people would be in favour of taking the 8th Amendment out of the Constitution, and then after that you have to legislate or regulate for how women can access abortion in this country according to how the Citizens' Assembly recommended to the Dáil.
Mattie McGrath, what do you make of this?
You don't think I am?
No, I do. I think you're entitled to your beliefs. But what you're not entitled to do is to stop other people making a choice.
I'm saying the people
you're not entitled to stop women making their own choices. Nobody's entitled to that.
I have a wife and 8 kids myself.
And maybe your wife and your children have no desire or ever will have a desire or a need to have an abortion.
But
why would you stop other people having it?
One voice,
please. I didn't say anything about you. You're mixing me up with somebody else. I didn't say anything about you.
All right, Colm Brophy, I'm a bit confused as to what the point of the Citizens' Assembly was, because as looking back through the Fine Gael,
something out, Colm, that you haven't mentioned is that the recommendation from the citizens was to replace the 8th Amendment with an instruction to the Oireachtas to legislate. And that is the sentiment of what the Citizens' Assembly have asked us to do. We're elected, let's go and legislate. So if you're going to replace the 8th Amendment, you need to replace it with that statement: go and legislate, do your job. And it's at that point that we have to, discuss and argue and work out what type of legislation replaces, based on guidance from the Citizens' Assembly, because that's exactly what Enda Kenny said when he insisted that we must have these 99 randomly chosen citizens to guide us in what Middle Ireland thinks.
All right, I'm afraid that's all we have time for.